welcome back to the video, and this video is my spoiler-free review for Bullet Train. 5 assassins find themselves on a bullet train from Tokyo to Morioka with only a few stops in between. Through a bunch of twists and turns, the movie is a wild ride for everyone involved. Now, before you get into videos and you're here and you enjoy all my TV show and movie reviews, reactions, and breakdowns, make sure to subscribe and notification on so you don't miss any time I open a video or I go live. Both are wasting more time. Let's get right into it. So this video is going to be a little bit different. I'm not going to be reading off of bullet points or anything like that. I'm just going to talk because I feel like I have a lot to say about this movie because genuinely, I thought it was really good. But there are a few issues, and that is what I want to start off with. And the main one is the resolution. Usually within an action movie like this one, you want to go out feeling like you actually felt some emotional thing. The action meant something to you. The action actually felt impactful. But in all reality, through all of the action that was throughout this movie, and honestly, I was a big fan of the action itself, emotionally, it didn't really do anything for me. A big comparison in terms of action alone is Mission Impossible Fallout. That is one of, if not the greatest action movie of all time in my opinion, and I would say that the action at the end of the day felt emotionally resonant within the story. But here, I feel like the third act goes off the rails in terms of, well, okay, off the rails. The third act goes off the rails in terms of just the emotional side of everything. It definitely feels more emotional for the story, but it doesn't really feel like the action follows that per se. I think it was very interesting the direction they took in the third act. Personally, I was a big fan of it, but I also know a lot of people that weren't. But for me, I can say that the third act did a great job of selling the story in terms of making everything feel worth it. At one point in the middle of the movie, I was like, okay, there is a lot going on, and they were only adding stuff to it. They were only adding more and more to this already story that felt complicated. And I think they did a good job of capping it all off, connecting all of the stories, and making everything make sense. Now, again, not getting into spoilers here, but I do think that in terms of connecting the characters, they did a really great job with making Brad Pitt's character the central focus. But at the same time, it also felt like they utilized all of the side characters very well, bringing them all into a story. And whether they died or survived, I thought they did a great job of making it a point to make their characters interesting, to make them all have a good role, and make them all feel like they have a place in the story. They had a stacked cast, and I'm going to be honest, everyone felt like they played their part perfectly. Now, again, some parts were more comedic than others, some parts were shorter than others, some parts were more important than others. But at the end of the day, everyone who played their part did a great job. For example, Aaron Taylor Johnson and Brian Tyree Henry, they play Tangerine and Lemon in this movie, and they are phenomenal. They are probably the standouts of this movie, in my opinion. Obviously, Brad Pitt is great. He's always great. He has a ponytail in the third act of this movie, and it gets wild. At a certain point in this movie, you're like, okay, these characters are all great on their own, but how are they going to come together? And I think they do a great job with that in terms of going into the second act, making the story actually feel like it's going somewhere. Because on a bullet train, there's only so much you can do, but the first act set it up very well, and I think they did a good job of pacing it all out in terms of death, survival, combat itself, who decided to do what things. Like, the story as a whole moved very well, but I think it's also due to the acting. For example, again, Aaron Taylor Johnson, Brian Tyree Henry, I thought they did a great job with their characters. Their dynamic is perfect, and also their dynamic with other characters in terms of their past relationships and stuff like that. And all of these characters, like said in the synopsis, have a level of connection, but as the movie goes on, the connections get stronger and stronger, at least for the audience, because the audience kind of gets to understand, okay, this is the backstory between these two characters that we might not have even thought existed. I will say though, at a certain point, it does get a little over the top in terms of like, oh, this character died, but they didn't, maybe they did, maybe they didn't. It feels like they're going too back and forth on stuff just for story purposes, and it feels cheap at times, and that's another one of my issues with this movie. Honestly, I only have the two main issues. The one about the third act that I talked about before, but also the convenience to the story. A lot of these characters just feel like they're thrown in there for the story to move forward, and it really feels like they have no emotional value. I will say Brian Tyree Henry, Aaron Taylor Johnson, Brad Pitt, their performances are very well and emotionally timed perfectly. It feels like they have great moments in this movie, but I can say for almost every single one of the other characters, it really feels like they're just there for story purposes. Of course, it makes the story more interesting. I won't even lie to you guys. I had a smile through like 99% of the runtime of this movie, but that doesn't mean I can't put my critic hat on and actually complain about it, because though I was having fun, I think that does lend to my higher score than a lot of other people, which you guys will hear at the end of this video. But I do have to say that there are issues with the characters. Even though they're all very well developed, I think they do a good job of expanding everyone through backstories, which I thought was a very interesting creative decision. I'm going to talk about the creativity behind this movie later, because there's a lot of style that went into it, which I'll talk about. But in terms of the backstory specifically, I went into this movie knowing showing that they do a lot of backstory, but it's also very fast. It also lends itself to the story, and like I said before, it creates great character dynamics. For that, I think it's great. But at the same time, as I thought it was getting more annoying, is when they started to make more jokes about it and started making it a little bit funnier. And I thought then it was very funny, but I'll definitely say it felt unneeded at first how much they were doing it. But of course, we can't talk about Bullet Train without talking about the style. Now, that was my biggest worry going into this movie, that it would just be too much style, way style over substance. But personally, I don't really think it was. I know a lot of people that watched this movie weren't really a fan of the story itself, but personally, I'm a huge fan of the story, though obviously it gets over convoluted at the end. Like I said, that's a little bit of an issue. But for the most part, it takes everything from every part of this movie and it just piles it on top of one another, but it also makes it more emotional than you think it'd be. And I think that's a very great substance choice. And it's a pretty unique thing that you can really only do with like high level action movies. And it works especially well on a bullet train, one that's like closed environment where a character is trying to get off and other stuff happens. Like, it works specifically for this story. But I can say the same exact thing about the style. The style works exactly for this movie. I think if a lot of other movies attempted it, it would end up being style over substance. But here, I think they balanced that big stylistic manner of it well with the story. I could definitely see the argument for style over substance, but I think the first act set this movie up very well to where I don't necessarily think that's the case. Another funny thing that I found was I'm looking at the cast right now and everyone's name is like one or two words, but it's not even like an actual name. Like, it's Ladybug, the Wolf, Prince, Tangerine, the Sun, Lemon, the Hornet, the Elder, Wife. Like, I don't know what was the decision making behind this, but I think it just proves to be that this is a very simple story at its core, and that's why I like it so much. It's a simple story at its core, but it did a lot more than I expected. Maybe I expected this movie going in to just be a basic action bullet train movie, but I left the theater super surprised by the action, super surprised by the character work, and honestly just blown away with the amount of stuff they packed into this movie. So as a whole, yes, Bullet Train is doing a lot and maybe too much for some people, but for me, it was a messy, jumbled, colorful, but also intense ride that paid off by the end. Overall, I give Bullet Train a solid 8.5 out of 10. This is a near 9 for me. I'm excited to rewatch this sometime soon because it could go up or down, but as of right now, I'm settling at an 8.5. But that's it for this review. Bullet Train comes out later this week, and if you've seen or want to check out Bullet Train, let me know what you thought of it in the comments down below. Also, I wanted to remind you guys to follow me on Letterboxd. It's AP_1216. I log every single movie I watch on there, and I've basically been watching like one movie every day. So again, check that out. That'll be linked in the description down below. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace.